So what I'm going to do today is two times when I was speaking on at the 5 p.m. service, and others have come and brought words to us, I've spoken on the parable of the Prodigal Son in Luke 15. And the first time I spoke on this, we focused on the Father. If you were here, you might remember that. And we looked at the characteristics, who God is. Because in the parable, Jesus is telling us what Father God is like. It's an amazing Father who's looking to the horizon for the one to return to him, and runs to him and embraces him and changes everything for him. And then the second time I looked, we talked a little bit about the older brother. Is any of this, if you were here, if this reminded you of anything that I've ever said, please nod a word of encouragement or something. And so the older brother, who was very bitter, unforgiving, and we're left with a cliffhanger. We don't know if he went into the party. It's just left hanging. Tonight, I want to talk about what most people think is the actual subject of the parable, is this prodigal, the wandering son, the wasteful son, the younger brother. I'm not going to read the whole passage because I want us to spend time in worship. So I'm just going to pick out from Luke 15 some of the things he says. And he says two key things. He says two key things to the Father. So I'm going to mention the one, and we're going to see his journey, and then we're going to see the second key thing he says and how that brings a transformation to him. But we find in verse 12, it says this: the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." And so he divided his property between them. Now, we read that matter-of-factly, but I already covered. You can look back on the recordings. We use a microphone on these evenings so that we're actually able to record. And you can look back and see all the nuances and everything that meant. But did you pick up there what he says? Two words: give me. Give me. That's the first significant thing he says. And he has a heart that is centered on himself. That's what he wants. He wants his benefit. So he's looking for, and we've met give me people. Maybe you've been or are a give me person. I don't know. You're looking for your blessing, for my reward or my blessing, for my wants, for my house, for my job, for my things. Give me, give me, give me. That our prayer lives before God have just become a request list for what we want God to do for us. Give me, give me, give me. My name is Jimmy, we used to say back in the day. And those kind of people live in a world where they're the center of it. Everything revolves around them. They're looking to be blessed, but not to be a blessing. They're looking to be number one in the dinner queue at school. You ever met those people? Always had to barge in, pushing in front of the queue. You're at the supermarket, maybe you're minding your own business, and someone pushes in with their trolley. You know, I always think Christmas is the strangest time for us to say peace on earth, goodwill to all people, because I think they haven't heard of that in Aldi. Because it's a bit mental, isn't it? You know, everybody's just pushing in, and there's me first, and all of this kind of thing. And what we discover is that when they don't get what they want, they start going to other churches. Nothing wrong with other churches. But sometimes what happens across a town is the deck, if you like, is shuffled. The people move churches. Oh, I'm not being fed there. I'm not being fed. That's a favourite one, by the way. I'm not being fed. I had a couple years ago, I took them out for dinner, and they said, "Oh, we're leaving the church. We're going somewhere. We've decided to go somewhere else." "Why are you going somewhere else?" "You're not feeding us." And I said, "Really? But 3 weeks ago you were telling me I was the best pastor and the best preacher you'd ever had." So, and I probably wasn't that either, to be fair. I probably wasn't the best that they'd ever had. But it's just one of those things, oh, we're not being fed, as though it's, you know, unless I am satisfied. Give me, give me, give me. But that kind of appetite is never satisfied. They're always going to want more. The Bible speaks clearly about inheritances that come too early. It says in Proverbs 20:21, an inheritance claimed too soon will not be blessed at the end. And we see that with this young guy, because he wastes everything. his give me lifestyle is wasted. And if you read it, and we'll look at a few things here, if you read through the whole parable, it's as though everyone gathers around him at the beginning when he's got lots of dosh, he's got lots of money, he's got lots of friends. But when the money runs out, those people disappear. Why? Because they're also give me people. They're also the kind of people that just hang out because they think they're going to get something. And it says in verse 13, it says, not long after he got his money, the younger son got together everything he had and set off for a distant country, where he squandered his wealth with wild living. Now, in context, when Jesus is telling this, that this means what he's saying is he abandoned Israel, he abandons the Holy Land, the chosen place, to go somewhere else into exile, into a Gentile, into a pagan country where he could live the way he wanted when no one was watching him. No one was going to say, oh, you shouldn't do that, young man, because they were all doing that. And during this story, we need to capture some of this in our hearts, because as Jesus is telling this story, I picture it that there's growing horror on the faces of those he's talking to, which are the Pharisees and the religious people and things. And each stage of this story, you could see that it's almost though their jaw drops a little bit more until eventually it's on the floor. You know, it's like, what? How bad is this going to get? The prodigal son experiences 4 areas of humiliation for him. The first one, humiliation number 1, is he works for a pagan. All the money's gone, and the only job he could get is with a pagan farmer. Now, for a devout Jew to work for a Gentile was almost as low as you could go. Almost as low. I mean, it gets worse, but it's almost as low as you could go. And that was a sign to those who are listening that he's placed himself under the command of the world, not under the command of God. He's removed himself from being under God's rule and the lordship that he has into being under the command of the enemy. That's the first jaw drop moment. You don't look that impressed by that. You're like, yeah. But trust me, as they're listening to this, they'll be going, what? He did that? He did that? Really? He did that? Oh, gosh. You know, that son, they should have sorted him out, because when he went to his father and said, give me everything, he was actually saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. I don't want you around anymore. He could have been taken out and stoned to death himself. And now he's out there working for a pagan. But then there's more. Because that person, it says, you will go and feed my pigs. This is the second humiliation. We might read that. We might have a vague notion that pigs are unclean and to be avoided by the Jews. But he had to go and feed them. So he was getting too close to them. And every day he's working there, he can feel himself drifting a little bit further. And they would have known that this is a sign that he can no longer go and worship God in the temple. Now, why is that a sign of that? Because if he's had contact with pigs, he's got to spend 7 days going through ritual cleaning before, under the Jewish law, before he can actually go in and worship at the temple again. But how often does he have to feed the pigs? You're from a farming background. How often do you feed the pigs, John? Twice a day. So he's going to have no opportunity to get ceremonial clean to go and worship. So when they hear that, they're like, wow, not only is he working for a pagan, he's stopped worshipping because he can't anymore. He can't go and fellowship. Wow, that would have been bad enough. I mean, you'd think Jesus would just stop there, to be honest. But he doesn't. He goes on and he says, the third humiliation says he would have just been happy to eat the pig food. John, I don't know what pig food looks like, mate. Is it appetizing? It's not great. I don't know. I've seen pigs. I've never really bothered to have a look and see what they're eating. I mean, I've watched Clarkson Farm, and I know that there are pigs, but I've never really bothered to look at what they're eating. And so when Jesus says here, he's wanting to eat the very food that the pigs are eating, he's experiencing a level of hunger. And that was going to be a sign for them that the provision of God was no longer on his life. So what we need to understand about this is God gives you so much rope, but God will not continue to bless a sinful lifestyle. He'll give you so much rope, but eventually the effects of his provision dry up because you're outside of his care. So they're getting this, but then there's more. Humiliation number 4 says nobody would give him anything to eat. No one gave him food. The pigs were being fed, but you just have this picture of his fine clothes becoming rags over a period of time, that he's covered with mud, that he's gone from the healthy 12 stone that I am down to, well, under here somewhere there's 12 stone. And he's become emaciated and gaunt. And he's actually no longer, the sign of this is that he's no longer even valued as a human being, because nobody would even stop and give him something to eat. And as people heard that, they would have been so desperately, desperately shocked. And for every one of us here, there comes a moment when we have to realize that life without God is worse. It's the worst. But then there's the second key phrase. Jesus doesn't end the parable here. And the second key phrase can be found in verse 19. He's planning this speech. He's planning what he's going to say. He's decided to go back to his father. It says he came to his senses. And he realized that this life he was living wasn't actually the normal life that God had called him to. He says he came to his senses and he says, I'm going to go to my father. I'm going to say, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. That's one of the most powerful verses in the Bible. He got up and went to his father. But did you see the little phrase there? He said, I'm going to go to him and I'm going to say, make me. Not make me do something, make me. He's moved from saying give me to make me. See, for Jesus, to live for Jesus, you don't have to lose your mind. You actually just have to come to your senses. You have to come to a point where you say, this isn't right. This isn't what I was created for. This isn't the life that I was called to live. And he says, I will go back. So he decides to go back because he realizes that if his father would make him like a servant, he's realized that a servant's worst day with his father is better than his best day without him. I'll say that to you again because that's a bit complicated. He realizes that the servant's best day with the father is better than his best day without him. The servant's worst day, rather, with the father is better than his best day without him. Our life with Jesus, our worst day with Jesus is better than our best day without him. And so he turns back. There's this action of repentance. He says, I'm going to change. I'm going to go back. He changes direction. He moves towards the Father. What's happening? He's moving towards God. And as he gets there, and he begins his little prepared speech, I am not worthy. I'm not worthy to be called your son. See, people will say to today, and they often will say to me, I don't like it when churches and preachers speak about guilt and they speak about shame, because really those are oppressive terms and we don't want to live under those and all of those kind of things. And then they say the solution is this positive thinking and not to accept those things and all of that. And I understand what they're saying, because guilt and shame are powerful things. They're difficult things to deal with. Shame is the feeling of what we've done wrong, and guilt is the reality of what we've done wrong. I can remember being pulled over by the police. I know you're going to find this very difficult to believe, me as pastor, but I had two of my sons and another lad who was staying with us at the time in the back of the car, and Barbie beside me, and I'd come out of our road and I'd just slammed my accelerator down in my Vauxhall Zafira 1.6 that I had at the time. So we lurched off 0 to 60 in 28 seconds. You know, we were really going for it because we were running late because, as I said, I had three lads with me, 2 of them mine and my wife, and we were just late. And I was going to an award ceremony that the churches have put on for the refuse collectors in our town. So I was going to a good thing, right? You're like, really? You did that? Yeah, we did this. We did this award ceremony. It was in a fish and chip shop. It was lovely. And as I'm accelerating away at the speed of a snail on drugs or something, just really going for it in my car, overladen, a policeman steps out from behind a building and pulls me over into the car park. Oh no, 400 meters from where I live. And he gets me out of the car and he says, right, sir, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm on my way to an award ceremony for refuse collectors. And he didn't believe me. I don't know why he didn't believe me. He didn't believe me. And he's like, really, sir, I think you're telling me stories. Of course, I've got 3 teenage lads in the back of the car sniggering. I've got all my neighbours driving past going, oh, well, our case's been caught. The shame. The shame. Shame was real. I was like embarrassed. Shame is embarrassing. And then he was like, I'm going to breathalyze you. Oh, no. No, can we do this somewhere privately? I mean, it's a main road. People are tooting at me as, hello, Keith, how you doing? Doing all of this. Of course, it was 0. It was 0. And he said, well, I'm going to write you up for a ticket because you were going... I did mention I was in a 1.6 Vauxhall Zafira. You were going 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. I was quite impressed that we were going that fast, to be honest, in that car. I said, right, okay. And I said, but really, I'm doing this. And he said, you're guilty. See, shame is how you feel about it. Guilt is the reality about it. And what Jesus does is he removes the shame, not a temporary quick fix. And he stands in our place and takes our guilt. Because legally, guilt has to be dealt with. Your guilt has to be dealt with. That's why Jesus went to a cross to take the punishment for your sins and for my sins. Guilt has to be dealt with. But in Jesus, it is dealt with. And so we don't shy away from talking about guilt and shame. With that, we don't want people to feel needlessly shameful and needlessly guilty. But the reality is, we all have some experience of it. And it's only him that deals with it. And he goes and he starts this speech and he's about to say, make me. He's now willing to express the desire to be changed. Before he said, give me. The Father's like, shh, enough of that. See, God sees your heart. You see, Patrick Regan mentioned something the other day, which would have been the 5th humiliation in this story, is that the village elders, if they'd seen that boy coming back, they would have taken him to the gates and they would have flogged him. And there would have been a justice there, another humiliation. One of the reasons the Father is looking for you on the horizon, and one of the reasons he runs to you and puts the robe on you and the ring on you and the sandals on your feet and does all those things, is so that you are not publicly humiliated. Because Jesus was humiliated for us. That's amazing. See, everyone listening to the story thinking, yeah, the village elders would have got him. They would have got him. They would have sorted him out. And actually, the Father gets there first. As soon as your heart and your mind turn back towards Jesus, he comes. He comes. And give me is often built, that give me versus make me attitude. The give me stuff is built on selfish motives. Make me is built on God's agenda. So let me give you a few examples. You might be praying, Lord, give me a ministry. Give me a ministry. When actually we should be praying, Lord, make me your servant. Give me more money. Or make me a better steward of what I have. Give me a wife or a husband. Or make me a person worthy of marriage. Give me blessings. Or make me a blessing towards others. The Father interrupts this speech The Son says, I've sinned against heaven and earth and against you. And the scripture says, but the Father said. But the Father said. See, he sees the heart. He sees where we're coming from. He restores the son and the daughter. He removes the shame. He deals with the guilt. He puts the robe on, speaking of the family. He puts the ring on, speaking of your authority. He puts the shoes on, saying you're not a servant. Go back and listen to part 1 online if you want to catch up with this. But note this, the Father said. So when people around you remind you of how bad you were, you can say, but the Father said. When the devil reminds you of your past, you can say, but the Father said. When your circumstances squeeze you, you can say, but my Father has said. When your life is hard, you can say, my Father said. We marry that up a little bit with what we were talking about this morning. What does he say over your life? Tonight as we worship, and as we respond, we dwell a bit in worship, a bit longer after a short message. More than we have time for maybe on a Sunday morning. And I want us to encounter God in a way that we're able to stop saying give me and start saying make me. Stop saying give me and start saying make me. Let's worship together, shall we? Team, come on. And let's have that in our hearts to be able to say, Lord, what is it? What selfish thing have we put before? What unconfessed sin is there? What is there going on in our hearts? And we're just going to spend a bit of time worshipping him and honouring him and coming back to him. And as the team often say, there's lots of space here in this setup. And I'm going to go over to a quiet place, probably in that corner, and just worship God alone. Not alone, but I'm with you, if you see what I mean. But by doing that, I'm not saying I don't want to be with you. I just want to give you permission to be able to move around a bit. Because we get so stuck in our ways, or we must stay where we are. You might want to go to a quiet place and say, Lord, this is between you and me right now. Make me who you want me to be. Let's worship him.